If nobody saw it, then it didn't flop, it didn't fail because no one saw it.
If this conversation hits home for you, the best way to support the show is to follow, share, and leave a quick review. I really appreciate you guys so much. On to the episode. Well, welcome, my friends, to another incredible episode of Purpose-Driven Progress. As always, I'm your host, Jacob Hicks, and I got to tell you guys, I got a really fun one for you today. So I'm bringing on Miles Brazan-Harmon. He's a seasoned brand strategist, actor, and entrepreneur. Throughout his career, Miles has spearheaded campaigns with the NFL, Ulta Beauty, and Amazon. Currently, he's producing a slate of original projects with an emphasis on cultural storytelling across the fashion and entertainment industries. His passion for bridging culture and e-commerce drives his work. Miles is also a health and wellness enthusiast who enjoys completing home improvement projects and perfecting new recipes. In 2020, he launched the creative production, publishing, and image management company, Mogul Money World, which sets out to redefine media in the modern age. Miles, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, so we're stoked to have you, man. So, gosh, we got a ton to unpack there from, NFL, Amazon, Ulta. So, kind of walk us through, your story a little bit. How did you go from, doing like working with some crazy big brands like that to, opening your own production company?
Yeah, I got bit by the entrepreneur bug quite early.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
Both of my parents are career entrepreneurs. My mom in financial services, my dad in home and construction. So I got my start as a web developer, building out websites for D2C brands, so a few consumer package brands, wealth services. And from there, it kind of just evolved. You don't really realize uh, that you're doing something until someone's like, "Oh, this is good. Like this is actually you have a knack and a talent for it." And I've always been someone where I like to say I have the DIY mentality. So
Yeah.
if I can figure out how to do it, I'm going to figure out how to do it. So from there, I just started scaling. And once we got into the corporate world, I started working in cosmetics. So that's when I really started getting into it with the brand partnerships and influencer marketing and really seeing how the teams work at a larger scale. And there I was able to do some really amazing work with the teams at Ulta, working with Superdrug over across the pond in the UK. And then after I left the private equity I was working for in-house, I transitioned to working at Rock Nation, which is the agency founded by Sean J.C. Carter, working specifically on their fashion vertical paper planes. Working with them, I also was able to work across the agency catalog a bit, doing things for GovBall in New York City, Douce Champagne. I was helping with a few activations that they were having there. And of course, the Rock Nation has the partnership with the NFL. And so with Paper Planes, we also did a few NFL collabs. So getting to work with a few of the teams there. And once my tenure at Rock Nation was over, Rock Nation was kind of a career highlight for me. It was something where it was something that was always on my goal list. And after leaving, I kind of really sat back and I was like, okay, I've kind of hit all these benchmarks very quickly, I might add. And I really needed a reset. And I had these agency contacts and all of the people I had met while working in corporate. And it just made sense to sort of just take the leap and have faith in myself and have faith in the freelancers I was working with at the time and just really try to break bread with my ecosystem. So that's sort of how Mogul Money World came about, from working in music to working with fashion brands, and now we're running up and running.
I love it, man. I love it. So, tell us a little bit more about that because because Mogul Money World, like, it's really about telling, like, storytelling, right? Especially like brand
Mhm.
and cultural storytelling that's not maybe doesn't get as many eyes as normal, right? So, what kind of drew you to that space in the first place?
Growing up in Chicago, I think seeing the culture that we have. If you're from Chicago, you like, yeah, we live in Illinois, but we don't consider ourselves Illinoisans. Like you are a
Yeah. Yep.
Chicagoan, like Shy City, like this is our like we consider ourselves our own slice of the world, if that makes sense. So
100%.
having that rich pride and a lot of our ancestors and our grandparents, they're from down south. So we're raised with those deep Southern cultural values and you go into these rooms and you're working with all these teams and you sort of are in this bubble, if that makes sense, where things that you're not really on the ground and working with the actual consumer and the customer. It's not so facing, you're coming up with
Yeah.
all these big ideas and hoping that it resonates. And when I had the chance to actually talk to our audiences and hear their perspective about the work that we were doing, it clicked for me where I kind of needed to take another approach to it, and especially where everyone's sort of entrepreneur driven now and the gig start economy, and everyone's trying to find their own way and their own lane. And I wanted to set my production house and my agency apart where, it's not necessarily just about us trying to hit KPIs and make money. It's about really making impactful work that resonates with
Mhm.
them. So it's knowing their pain points, what drives you as a consumer, because when you're going to make a purchase, it's not just, you're not, you can just buy it, but what's really driving that buy? What are you going through? And making work that really serves them, not just on a superficial level, but something that really sticks with them, having something in your home or even just when you listen to music and it's that feeling that you have. And so the work that we're doing right now is really trying to tap into that feeling and tap into the ethos of what it is to really be human in this digital age where we're connected as ever, but we're still not connected in a personal level. We're wearing these curated faces and these curated masks of who we want people to think we are. And even to a certain degree, we're manifesting who we are in the digital space. And I wanted to peel back a lot of those layers. So a lot of the work that we're doing now is really peeling back those layers and getting to the root of like what bridges us together as humanity and, how do we create a culture that celebrates us through the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. Well, and I mean, obviously, there's a lot that goes into these kind of productions, right? Into the storytelling to make it authentic. So, for anybody out there listening that maybe, they're working on their social media or they're working
Mhm,
on, like just their like how they're representing themselves and telling their story, right?
mhm,
Do you have like any like tips or insight into like how do I as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a salesperson or whatever,
mhm.
how do I lead authentically and how do I show up authentically for like my clients or my customers?
I would say be in it for the long game. Like even when
Mm-hmm.
I consult and even acquire new customers, I really like to sit down with founders and teams and get to the root, what do you want this to look like in 10, 15 years? And even in the social landscape where it's always changing, but what do you want to say? It's one thing to come up with products and say, okay, this is going to be the messaging, but how do we translate that? How do we really tie in? And that's why, like, I named Mogul Money. It was originally just Mogul Money. And then I was like, we're going to tack world on there just for not only branding purposes, but how do we really create an ethos? Something for people
Mm-hmm.
to hold on to, where even if they're not clicking purchase or buying what we're selling, they feel a part of a movement. So I would say making a movement, making something that you want to last outside of just this moment. Playing the long game is always key in marketing because even when you think of brands like Calvin Klein and you think of the transition over history and even having those brand hallmarks that you can sort of go back to because a lot of what's going on now with the marketing landscape, people are pulling from nostalgia. They're going back into their archives and looking at these old campaigns and saying, okay, how can we pull from this, but then incorporate it with the new school and translate it for digital? So creating pillars for your brand that 10, 20 years from now, you'll look back and be like, okay, we're gonna bring this back out of the archive and let's add something new to it.
I love that, man. I love that. When I totally agree with you. And I'm really curious. I want to go off script here a little bit if you don't
Hmm.
mind. Because like in my, in my coaching practice, especially, like I've worked with,
Hmm.
salespeople and entrepreneurs and this in my experience, and it's like some of the experience of my colleagues and my peers too. A lot of people, and I mean, I think it's true in entrepreneurship especially, but a lot of people
Hmm.
just they don't exactly know where they're going, right? And I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about, like they're like when you're talking about the long game. It's like, hey, in
Hmm.
5 years,
Hmm.
Like what do you really want to be doing? Like what is your life? Like what do you
Hmm.
want your life to look like? And I feel like so many people in like, in the business world, they just
Hmm.
like you said, they're trying to hit KPIs and stuff, right? Which is important. Like you got to,
Absolutely.
try to be hitting numbers and, driving towards goals. But
Hmm.
if you don't have like those bigger picture visions of, hey, in 5 years, we're gonna be, doing X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
and to that point, we're gonna be driving towards these goals because of that. Do you feel like has that been true in your experience in working with so many founders where you just don't feel like they have like that long-term vision necessarily?
I definitely would say so. Even there's
Mhm.
a project I'm consulting on right now, and we're having a lot of those conversations about really finding the true essence of the
Yep.
brand. And
Yes.
it changes too. I don't want to make it seem like if you come in with one plan, that's gonna be the plan. Things
Right.
change. You change. Even me myself currently, like I lost my grandmother at the end of last year, and I was already feeling a lot of feelings of like, okay, I don't know if I necessarily want to do certain things anymore, or if I really feel passionate about certain aspects of my business. And losing her really taught me that it's okay to be
Mhm.
real with yourself and have that self-awareness of being like, okay, what you wanted 5 years ago may not necessarily be true for who you are for the current landscape. But I think it all just goes back to self-awareness too when you're starting these companies and just saying, okay, maybe you come and you have a product or, even speaking to like a sales manager or something like that, where, you're selling this product and you feel really good about it. But not only are you doing what's good for right now, but still also having that purview of like, okay, this is what could possibly happen, and always having the ability to risk assess and say, okay, let's put these ideas right here for right now. Let's put them in the corner
Mhm.
of like, okay, I may not want to do this, but let me just write a few things down as your contingency plan. You plan and then have your contingency plan. Okay, if things don't go the way that I want them to, or if I'm not aligned with what I'm selling or what I'm trying to make happen, having those few ideas in your bucket allow you to be like, okay, I had this idea 5 years ago and I wasn't ready to act on it, but now maybe we can find a way to incorporate it into our current model and
Mm.
sort of create that pivot. Like the pivot is super crucial. And that's something both of my parents really instilled in me, especially my mom, the ability to when life gives you lemons, you got to find a way to take them, make the lemonade, and pivot to something that's going to actually feed you and fuel you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, and I mean, I love that piece about talking about the pivot, right? Because I feel like, especially in entrepreneurship, like I don't have to tell you, like, I mean, especially early on, like pivoting is like you gotta try a bunch of stuff, figure out
Yes.
what works, decide it doesn't work at all, try
Hmm.
something totally new, or like change it a whole bunch. Like it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. It's actually it's on my wall right now.
Uh,
It's by Robert who worked on like the human genome project. Does like a bunch of stuff in science, right?
mhm.
And his kind of mantra, I guess, in the in the lab is just run the experiment. And I feel like
Yes.
that's obviously it's true in science is obviously, but I think it's especially true in entrepreneurship where you like yes, you should be doing some prep work, right? Like you need to
Hmm.
show up prepared. You need to understand like your business, your product, what you're doing, why you're doing it, the vision, all of that stuff we just talked about, right?
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, you gotta do that quickly, get that done, and then run the experiment. You gotta show up and try it and see what works. Has that been true in your experience too?
Oh, absolutely. It's especially when you're working with external teams. Me,
Yeah.
I'm trying to unlearn my perfectionism. I'm someone where when we start, like, okay, it needs to look like this and it needs to have the feel
Yep.
and have everything as buttoned up as possible. But when you're working with external teams, it's a lot of, oh, well, we're ready to get it going now. And you kind of, as a marketer or even just as a strategist, you kind of have to check your own pride and check your own ego and be like, okay, they want to just go ahead and throw it out. All right, let's just throw it out and see what happens. And it's been to the detriment. And sometimes you get something and you can hook them in and it's good. So it's a slippery slope, but it's also just having faith and being aligned with the team and saying, okay, we may not be 100% ready, but we're just going to step out on a limb and go ahead and do it. And I think, especially now where things move very quickly, someone told me this a very long time ago when I first started working in social, in the corporate field. If nobody saw it, then it didn't flop, it didn't fail because no one saw it. So no one
Yeah, who
knows
cares?
what happened. So, you take it on the chin and you're like, okay, nobody saw this. So that means it's either not resonating or we're not going about it in the right way. And so you take the data and you learn from it and then you implement new
Mm,
strategies to make sure that it happens.
yeah, I really really love that, particularly when we're talking about the perfectionism piece. And I feel like a mentor of mine told me that if you don't look back on the stuff you're putting out, in 6 months or 12 months and
Mhm.
cringe a little bit, then you're probably not growing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like for sure. And for me personally, like
Mhm.
if I feel like something's 80% of the way there, that's probably 80% further than most other people, right? So I might
Mhm.
as well just like put it out, try it, see what works. Most of the time like you said, just like try it and see what it does. Do you have like any like I mean, I know like I've dealt with a lot of people like in my practice where
Mhm.
like they kind of get in their heads about stuff, right? I'm sure you probably have dealt with this too, where people are like you were saying, like they're struggling with that perfectionism thing where it's like,
Mhm.
oh gosh, like what if it doesn't resonate or what if it doesn't go as well? I know for me, like
Mhm.
I'm always coaching people. It's like, yeah, listen, like you don't have a huge following right now. Like you're early on in the business. Like
Mhm.
nobody's probably going to watch it anyway. So who cares? Like let's put it out. Let's get it out. Let's get you comfortable with it. I mean,
Mhm.
have you dealt with that? Like with some of the founders, some of the teams you've worked with?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Especially when that person is in the driver's seat or they're your
Oh yeah.
mediator between actually getting things done. You do have to, I don't want to say like it's a lot of talking off the ledge. It's like, okay, things are gonna be okay, you're gonna be fine, you got this. I don't know. The way I try to navigate those situations is just really getting to the root of what's the fear,
Mm.
and honestly, to be very frank, like in entrepreneurship, if your fear is failure, you're in the wrong business
Mm.
because there's going to be a lot of that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be public, it's not going to have to be this huge, but we all have an idea of what we want things to look like. And when they're not panning out, we get in our heads. And when I speak to founders or even just stakeholders who can't necessarily get the wheels turning about how to find the solution,
Mm.
the way I like to phrase it is that, you know, you're focused on this one singular moment right now. The only way to get over this hurdle is to just move it out the way, move it to the side, and let's tackle something that is a little bit easier for you to wrap your head
Mm.
around. So if you have no clue how the influencer marketing game works and you're worried about this influencer and how they're gonna work with the product and you have no clue if they're gonna resonate with the audience, okay, maybe influencer marketing isn't your play right now. And maybe it's a little bit easier for you to focus on product, so let's just focus on building the best product. You have to keep everything moving at once at the same time too. A lot of people say do one thing at a time, but we live in a world where that's just not possible anymore to do one singular thing at a time and really build on that. You get things running and then you have to sort of, like we talked about, that pivot to something else that's a part of the business because that's the only way to really get the wheels turning. So a lot of it is just saying prioritizing, okay, if this is giving us a hurdle right now, maybe we just table this. Especially if you can't
Mm.
convince that stakeholder or even yourself, where it's like you're trying to really get out of your head and make it happen. You have to talk to yourself and say, okay, maybe I don't need to really bog down on this right now. Because if
Yeah.
it's not fueling me, if it's not pushing me to go ahead and get it out, obviously that means it's not that important to what is on the agenda right now.
I love that, man. Well, and like talking about like the failure piece, I feel like that's huge in like in life in general, of course, like especially in entrepreneurship. And like going back to like the experimenting thing I was mentioning earlier, like
Mhm.
that's one of my like I think of experimenting as obviously like trying something new, like seeing if
Mhm.
it works, then iterate, try something, like change it up, do something else. But I also really love it as like a mindset piece too, where like I really believe that if you
Absolutely.
are truly experimenting, right, like you're trying some new stuff on social media, whatever it
Mhm.
is, and you try it out and it doesn't work. Like you said, it doesn't like get the traction you thought it would. It's not a failure. It's just an experiment, right? I really believe that you can't fail an experiment because even if you are wrong in what you thought was going to happen, you still learned something from it. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work at all. So I'm going to try
Mhm.
something else. and then I'm gonna try that again, right?
Hmm.
I really, really love I love what you're saying, man. But swinging it back around here a little bit to the Mogul Money World, I want to talk about that a little bit more. 'Cause we were talking about like the storytelling piece, right?
Hmm.
Particularly like the untold stories. So is there a couple of stories or maybe a story or two that comes to your mind that either you've worked on or hope to work on that you really believe the world needs to hear?
Wow. So I was actually in Miami for Art Basel in December, and
Mm,
I met this gentleman. I don't want to give too much because I'm still trying to iron out the details of the project
yeah.
because it's something that it meant a lot. But he was giving me a lot of these stories about him working in the industry, and me and him were sort of having this chat, and it was just very open, honest, authentic. Like he was a vendor actually that was working for one of my clients, and we were having him
Mm,
create some art for for a t-shirt collab that we did with our partners down in Miami. And the gentleman, he was just telling me all these stories, and I'm hearing him, and I'm like, you could be writing a book. And he's this guy where he doesn't do social, like he's not on the Instagram taking pictures.
yep.
Like the man does his job. He has his own shop and he does his art and he likes to go home, smoke cigars. You know, he doesn't tell his wife. He goes, does his thing, goes home and is a family man. And that's it. He's not interested in fame or any of that. And I was telling him, I'm like, your story is so like people need to hear this. Like,
Mm,
and it was another time I was in New York and I was visiting a showroom with a few of my friends. And, it got me thinking of this original project that, I'm currently in the gears of working on, where we want to tell some untold stories within the fashion industry of people who've worked for big, huge brands, whether it's Dior or Max Mara, like in early in their inception, like I'm talking about
mm.
like 1940s, 50s, like into what the new generation would call quote unquote old. Because even me, I
Yeah,
learned
yeah.
the other day I'm old now too, apparently. Um, but just hearing the stories of people that came before us, and I think we're in this age now where because we see so much that we sort of think that we have access to everything, but it's nothing like just sitting down and having a conversation. Like even just me and you right now, just sitting down, having a conversation with someone, and you will learn more than you could learn in any self-help book or scrolling on the internet or using chat gpt. So a lot of those stories have sparked some of the new projects that we're working on where we're going to tell some of those stories in a publishing format, trying to get a crew together to start working on a docu-series as well. So a lot of those projects I want to start getting, the ball rolling and getting those things filmed within the next year. And hopefully we can launch those, if not the end of next year, 27. So to go back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, just we're really in the long game right now where, media is so fast paced and so moving. Um, but I think we have some leeway right now where we can really tell some impactful stories and take our time and do
Mm.
justice to these people who are what I like to say unsung heroes who you'd never know put in all this time and effort to make the great things that we love and hold dear in the fashion and music and entertainment space. So that's been a big part of it right now.
I love that, man. I mean, that like when you were talking, like that just really reminds me of. I don't know if you ever saw it, but it was a movie that came out on Disney. I want to say a handful of years ago called Hidden Figures. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, Hidden
Like that.
Figures.
That is kind of like that. Like sounds like a really similar thing, where it's just these folks that were like instrumental in, like I said, like these brands or like the NASA space projects or like whatever else we're talking
Hmm.
about. That you don't hear about it. For like I mean a number of reasons, obviously, but I love that, man. I think that's absolutely fantastic. So my last
Thank
couple
you.
of things here as we kind of wrap up the episode.
Hmm.
As we mentioned earlier, like you've worn a lot of hats, right? Like actor, entrepreneur, strategist, obviously, marketer.
Absolutely.
So, like you said before, like this is like in this day and age, you kind of have to focus on a couple of different things, right? Like you gotta keep pivoting, you gotta try new stuff, experiment, figure things out. But how do you personally decide what you want to say yes to and what do you walk away from?
It's gotten a lot easier now. I think when I was really in the hustle and bustle, and when you're really in the thick of the industry and you're in these circles, it's moving very quickly. So you say yes to a lot of things. Um,
Mm,
but I think right now for me, family is super important, and
mm,
trying to not even necessarily find balance, but make time for things that are important. Even in my corporate life, I saw a lot of things and I did a lot of things that maybe a year and a half prior or 2 years before, I was like, oh wow, I can't wait to do those things. And then you go and you do them and you're like, I don't necessarily know if this was really, it didn't live up to the hype. It didn't give me
yeah,
the
yeah.
fuel and the things that I thought it would. And so I think that really helped. I think you have to learn. It's a learning process. I think you have to do
Mhm.
some things that you should have said no to be like, okay, I will never do that again. And then there's some things you say yes to, and you're like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love that, man. I love that.
absolutely. And just living with no regrets too, I think is a
Mm,
part of it too. I think we beat ourselves up a lot. We have to give ourselves grace and just say, it's all a part of the journey. And
mm.
again, I would rather have a super long legacy than be at the top tomorrow and be at the bottom in 4.5 weeks after that. So
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think what you were like what you just said is really gold, honestly. Like, and I want to make sure people don't miss it. And like, I feel like what you're saying is you have to be really intentional with what you're doing, right? Like, do things on purpose. Like, don't just, wake up Monday morning and just like, okay, well, we'll see what kind of work we can get done today. But like, plan some things out and like figure some stuff out that you're actually going to get done on purpose, right? Like what I
absolutely.
always tell, what I'm always telling people is that if you are whether you're saying yes or you're saying no, you're really saying both, right? Like if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else always. And if you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else always. So I think like you just have to kind of again, it comes back to that intentionality piece where you just have to show up like authentically, like we mentioned before, and intentionally, like just saying like I can't do that right now because I've got X, Y, and Z that I have to get done. Well, Miles, thank you so much for being on the show today, man. Like this was this is absolutely fantastic. But looking forward to, the rest of 2025. What's, I think you mentioned some things, but what's kind of some other, big bold moves that you're making for this year?
Yeah, so still doing some consulting work with a few brands. So Legacy of Resilience,
Mm,
that's Charlemagne the God's clothing vertical. So super excited for what we have coming down the pipeline for that. There's another one of my clients, June. So
mm,
working with them, I'm actually wearing one of their hoodies right now. So they're in the middle of releasing season two. So
mm,
super just excited for what we have coming down the pipeline for that. And then Mogul Money Daily is our newsletter, the Mogul Money World official newsletter, where we talk about tech, business, and culture. So it's daily news through our Substack. We have a members club you can join when you join our founders subscription. So
mm.
just keeping the ball turning and working on some really amazing projects. So you can follow us at Mogul Money World, follow me at Signed Miles everywhere. And yeah, that's what's going on.
Love it, man. Well, so I'll make sure to include the links to, all those things you mentioned, so people can follow along and, keep in touch with some of the great stories that you're going to be telling here the next couple of years. But Miles, thanks again for coming on, man. This has been absolutely fantastic. And
Of
anybody out there
course.
listening, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate you.